Morning guys, you're joining me today at the absolute stunning White Springs Fishery. Now it's Wednesday the 15th of January. I've got a Fish South Qualifier here this Saturday. So I thought, I've only ever been once before, so I thought I'd come over today and have a little look, because the lake that I drew last time I come was, I believe it was Match Lake just up there, and this time the match is on Canal Lake. So I thought I'd come over today, have a little look at the lake. And thank God it's warmed up a touch. I almost died at Tunnel Barn last week. It was -6 when we got there, and it never went above like -2 all day. So thank God it's warmed up, the sun's out and it's lovely. It feels like 15 degrees today. It's probably more like 10. But after such a cold spell, it feels just beautiful. It feels like summer. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to film exactly what I do today to just show you how I go about going on to a pleasure fishing session, practicing for a match. It's actually took me about 3 hours to get here because we've had an accident on the M5, we had a lorry fire. So we haven't got loads of time, it's getting on for 1 o'clock now. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to keep it really, really simple. I've spoken to my good mate Mikey Williams, and I've spoken to also my good mate John Arvid, who's also fishing today just down from me, about how they fish here. And it's a bit odd really, because the match was won here last week with like 50 odd pound of skimmers and I'd, and the guy that won it, he just loose fed pinkies and potted a bit of ground bait, which seems a little bit alien to me, because normally when you fish for those sort of weights, you're going to be fishing with maggots or casters, being really positive and aggressive, which is also another reason why I wanted to come today. I want to just come, pot in some ground bait, loose feed some pinkies and just see how good it is. I mean, if it's really, really good fishing like that, I might come Saturday and fish like that again. I might come and fish maggots or casters, because you're probably going to be looking at 50 to 60 pounds to win. So yeah, I'm just going to fish one line because we haven't got loads of time. It's obviously, Canal Lake is a canal style lake. We've got about 13 metres to the island. So what I'm going to do, how I fancy fishing, I fancy just plumbing up so it just comes up onto that far shelf. Now right on that crease of the shelf, I'm going to fish there. I'm going to pot in a little bit of loose ground bait. I'm going to loose feed pinkies and see what I can catch. John's just told me it's about 3.5 foot deep. So I'm probably going to set up a 0.3 Matrix F1 Slim, little bulk, one dropper, and just see what I can catch. Yeah, on pinkies really. That's why I wanted to come over. The weather's nice and the fishing's great here. So yeah, I've set up most of my kit, but I'm going to go and have a plumb up now. And then once I start my day, I'll start filming again and see how it goes. Right, we're all ready to go. Like I said briefly earlier, I'm just going to keep it really simple today, so we haven't got long left. So I've mixed up some Sonia Baits Super Crush Expander. I think if you go to any venue where you're fishing for silverfish, skimmers, F1s, stuff like that, if you're unsure about what ground bait to use, I think Crushed Expander is a great starting point. If I was to come here today and then start hooking bigger skimmers, some slightly bigger fish, I might think about adding something into the Crushed Expander, i.e. maybe a Thatcher's ground bait or like a F1 green. But because I haven't been, I don't really know. I'm just going to start with Crushed Expander and see how it goes, and then make my mind up after today. So yeah, I've mixed up my Crushed Expander. I've mixed it up really wet. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to put a little ball in and like a handful of loose on top of that in my cup that in, loose feed some pinkies. I've got my pinkies. I brought 2 pints. I've got, like, they're probably 90% fluoro, a few whites and a few reds mixed in, which is quite a nice mixture really. I was looking at it in the shop the other day and I thought, well, that looks quite nice, so I just bought them like that. And then it plums up really weird. So basically the deepest water in my peg is on like a top 3. So I've got my top kit, and then my next section, that's the deepest. Then it's deep. Then it comes up to about a top 6. I'll actually show you whilst I'm doing it. So it's only very shallow. I think the deepest bit is about 3.5 foot. So that is about the deepest bit in my peg there. And then what you'll see, it's all flat, quite deep, flat. And then we get to about this point here. And it all starts to come up. There we go. It all starts to come up at that point. And then it'll come up over about half a section. So it's like a little slope. And then over this section, it flattens out again. So what you've got flat, little slope, flat, slope to the island. So I'm going to choose to fish on that second flat bit just before it comes up the second shelf towards the island, which is 11.5 metres, which is a lovely distance to fish when you're loose feeding pinkies. I feel at that distance I'm going to keep fish coming for the whole 5 hours, and it's a nice depth to catch those quality fish in. So on that second shelf, I'm just coming up onto the shelf there, and then past that point it comes up again to the island, which for me is a nice place to fish. So yeah, like I said, I've thumbed up there. I've just set up a 0.3 Matrix F1 Slim, bulk and one dropper. I'll go through my rig in a little bit more detail in a minute. Yeah, from my fish there, like I said, I'm going to put in a little nugget of crushed expander. I'm going to put in a handful of loose, and I'm just going to put a few pinkies in my cup. Go right. Get right on my marker. Pop that in, and then I'm just going to loose feed a few pinkies just to get my distance right for when I start loose feeding. Which is quite nice. The spray of those pinkies creates quite a bit of an area, which is nice, because you can go past your bait, you can come inside your bait. This sort of reminds me of fishing the natural venues that I used to fish. I used to fish a lot of like natural canals and loose feeding squats with a little bit of ground bait, and that was the key back then, just to fish around your bait, right on it. But I feel like with the feeding today, because I'm pleasure fishing, you don't always get the perfect image on how to feed your peg. Everything changes in the match situation. So I'm going to get a rough guide on how to feed today, because John's fishing down there, and I can watch John a little bit as well. But the number one thing that I can get right today is all the kit I'm using. So my elastics, my hooks, my lines, my floats. If I come here and I know all of that's perfect, then on the day, all I've got to do is really work out the feeding. And also today is going to give me a half idea with the feeding. So yeah, that's how I've started my peg. I'm just going to feed one line, just going to fish for 2 or 3 hours. I'm going to have a mess about with hooks and lines and floats and stuff. I'm pretty much sure my 0.3 F1 Slim would be right. But with shotting patterns and stuff like that. So we're fishing for eyed as well today. And I know a lot of the lakes where a lot of the other lads fish, when they fish for eyed, they fish strung out rigs, which I'm not a fan of, because a lot of the venues I go to, there's just lots of small fish. So yeah, we'll have a go and see what happens. I've just fed now, so I'm going to bait up, and I'll start filming in about half hours ago, hopefully when I'm catching a few fish. Yeah. 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 Right, so we have been fishing for about an hour now, and I've got to be honest, it's not as good as I thought it was going to be. I fed my line with that little nugget of ground bait and a bit of loose, like I said I was going to. And I've loose fed my pinkies, but I'm not sure about it. The one thing I can see that's 100% noticeable is that looking at the other guys and looking at John, when you catch a fish on a line, when you go back in, it's not normally great. It's almost like you want 2 lines on the go. Get one, top it up, move to the other line. I don't think my 0.3 floats are right either. It's only about 30 inches deep where I'm fishing, and I'm fishing with a little bulk and a dropper like I always do, but I've watched John and he's had 2 or 3 fish where I'm literally flicked his rig in, and then I've looked back at my float, looked back round, he's got one on, which tells me there's probably quite a few fish off the bottom and they're following the hook bait down. So what have we had so far? We've had 3 skimmers and an eyed, but like I said, every time I've caught one, because I've gone straight back in, because I've only fed one line, I've not caught again. It's took ages to get another bite. I'll have another go now, but I just don't think I'll catch now. Now I've caught one, but the water is absolutely gin clear. When you net the fish, you can see them like 2 foot down. It's absolutely gin clear. So what I'm thinking after fishing for 1 hour is that my floats are a little bit too big. I need to change my shotting pattern, and the fish are a bit sporadic. You don't just catch them on one line. You'll have to feed 2 or 3 lines and be quite active in where you're fishing, which is exactly why I wanted to come. Just these little things, like if this was match day now, I'll be thinking, well, I'm definitely doing it wrong already, you know. So I'll fish for another couple of minutes. Oh, that looked like a bite or an indication. One other thing I've learned since I've started fishing as well is that the light is really bad once you get a ripple. When it was absolutely flat calm like it was at the start, it was fine, because I could put my float in between the reflections and I could see it perfectly. But once you get a ripple, that's not the case. You can't really see your float. So on match day, what I'll do, I'll make sure I pick 2 spots that isn't like dark white. I'll try and find a spot that's all dark or all white. Ideally, if I can find a spot that's all white, like I've got to my left out there, that would be absolutely perfect, because I could just dimple down a little black bristle and I could see it absolutely spot on. But for me, so far today, I'm just not sure about all this loose feeding pinkies. It just feels like you want to put a little ball ground bait, a few dead maggots or a few dead pinkies in it, catch a fish and then repeat the process. I think this loose feeding, it would be good if it was lots of eyed feeding and a few skimmers, but just seems to me like I've had one-eyed, John's had one-eyed. Just seems to me that, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right at the moment. At the moment, I've only been fishing an hour or so. So by the end of the day, I might change my opinion a little bit, but at the moment it just seems a bit weird. Like, I caught that one then. If I was feeding it dead right and my peg was dead right, surely I would go back in and get another one. But this is exactly what's happened every time. I've literally gone, boom, got one, and then you go back in and you just don't get another bite. See, I feel now I need to pot some more ground bait to try and bring the fish in. This loose feeding doesn't seem to be doing much at all, in my opinion. But the guy that's been catching the biggest weights here, that's exactly what he's been doing. He's been loose feeding pinky, so God knows. Not at the moment, it's a little bit confusing at the moment, but the lake was froze on Saturday, I believe. It's Wednesday now, but it was froze on Saturday, which means the water temperature will still be quite cold. All that ice water's gone into it. Oh, pinky's just popped off it. See, then I've struck twice, but I wasn't 100% sure that it was a proper bite because I just can't quite see it right. So that's another good thing I've learnt. Picking my spots dead right. So I'll just fish for another couple of minutes, but I don't think I'm going to get a bite. I have fed in the deep water. I've put a little ball ground bait and I threw a few pinkies in the deep water, like there, just to see if it was the depth that was stopping the fish staying in your peg. But I haven't been on it yet. I have fed some ground bait there, so I was hoping to see some pinpricks, some shimmering on the water if some fish move in on that line. The only good thing is my pinkies are going in absolutely. I was a little bit worried about the accuracy of loose feeding pinkies at 11.5, but they are going in really nice, to be fair. It looks like looks like you're just going to get one a chuck, but something, I just feel like this is the sort of lake where if you can get the feeding dead right, you just catch one a chuck. But this don't feel, whatever I'm doing at the moment just don't feel right. See, that that's impossible to see you float now, because I've just got a tiniest little bit of ripple, and then that's just mixing up all the reflections, and I can't see it. Literally fishing blind now. So if this was match day, I would have to fish over into that dark water to my right, or I'd have to fish over into that light water to my left with a little black bristle. I'm really gutted I fished there now, to be honest, because I think if that little bit of tiny bit of ripple stays, then I'm going to struggle to see my float for the rest of the session. And I think the tiny bit of ripple that I've got is coming from those two ducks, where they're flapping about in the water. It's just making a tiny bit of ripple, which is annoying. I might go and get my gun in a minute. But yeah, so far I've only fishing an hour. Caught 3 skimmers and an eyed. Pick your spots dead right. Think about the reflections. Floats are a little bit too big. Definitely feeding more than one line at the moment. I get the feeding straight away. You're going to have to feed 2 or 3 lines. And I'm thinking that loose feeding's not right. So we'll carry on fishing for a bit, but that's the impression I'm getting so far. Be interesting to see exactly how John's fed it as well, but that's the impression I'm getting at the moment. So, but yeah, all good. It's nice that I'm learning straight away, because if I was to come in and just get one a chuck straight away, then I wouldn't know if I'm doing is right or wrong or whatnot, you know. It's actually probably more like match conditions today. But with it fishing like this, I can't see 40-50 pound winning. Like, unless we're fishing bad. John reckons this peg's alright though. But I'm looking at how much the guys are catching opposite, looking how much the guys are John's catching. And with 20 people around this lake on Saturday, it could be quite tricky. So yeah, what I'm going to do, I'll keep on fishing. I might start another line, see if I can pinch some dead maggots off of John, and just mix up a little bit of wet ground bait, a few dead maggots, and just pot a line off to my right, and just see if potting a little bit of ground bait with a few dead maggots is better than this loose feeding line. So that's probably what's going to be my next move. But we haven't got ages left. But I'm glad I've come already, because the impression I got after speaking to people, it was just like absolutely solid, but it's not like that at all. And the stamp of fish I've caught, 40 pound ain't a lot of fish at all. Not a lot. The first one I had was 2.5 pound. But when you're just fishing for an odd bite like this, I'm not sure about this loose feeding, especially pinkies. If you were just loose feeding 6 and 8 maggots, maybe it might be a bit different, but no, didn't think I was going to get a bite then. So what I'll do, I'll keep fishing for a bit. I might nick some dead maggots off of John, start a new line up, and just see if I can bounce off the 2 and go from there and have a little look at that. But definitely how I've started my match, or started my pleasure day, isn't right. Floats aren't right. I haven't fished in the right spot, and it does feel like I need 2 lines, but yeah, it's good that I'm learning. Fuck, I can't see it. Right, so another spanner in the works. Basically, I said to you, I was unsure about all the loose feeding and that, and about having 2 lines. So basically what I've done, I went and pinched some maggots from John, and I wetted some of that crust expander right up, so it's like literally like paste, because I know that can be good when you're not feeding a lot of bait. Re-plumbed up off to my right, just literally put a tiny little ball of that wet ground bait in, a few maggots, Left it like 12 minutes. Went in on it, not a bite. So what I thought would be really good hasn't been at all. And what I did do, I did top up my main line where I'm loose feeding pinkies with ground bait before going on that line and trying. And I just dropped back in on the line where I'm loose feeding these pinkies. And I caught 2 straight away. So I'm hoping I'll go in and might get another one now before having to top up the ground bait. But like, that is one thing I will say. In the past, whenever I've gone to a venue and the locals say something's right, they normally are pretty switched on with it. Especially a lot of the anglers over here. If they say something's good, it normally is pretty good. So I'm just going to carry on loose feeding a few pinkies. I have cut it down a touch because I was being quite aggressive with them, but it doesn't seem that sort of day. So I've just literally 12 or 15 pinkies twice. But one thing I am thinking of doing is just fishing with a tiny little kinder pot. Matrix make these tiny little kinder pots that big. I might even cut that down a touch. And then when I feel I need to get a bite, I might just fill that up with wet ground bait, plop that in and carry on fishing on that line. But it is getting to the sort of time of day now where the fishing should improve. That looked like a little indication. I'm really annoyed with myself about picking where I think it was probably because I was rushing a little bit to get started with the fishing, because I was a bit late. I'm really annoyed that I've picked where I've picked to fish because the light is awful. It's absolutely awful there. Like that last skimmer you just saw me catch then, the whole bristle popped out the water and a little bit of the body, so that was easy enough to see. But just in general, it's the light's not very good at all. The only problem I feel like putting a bit of ground bait in and loose feeding pinkies is good, or loose feeding maggots or pinkies is good. That seems to be a good way of fishing, but it just doesn't seem consistent enough to me. If it might be a case that you need 2 lines, you might need to loose feed on both of them. Put a little bit of ground bait, loose feed on both, and then just keep swapping and try and managing your peg as much as possible. But today is definitely not a £50 day. God, we're really struggling. What have I had now? 6 or 7 skimmers and an eyed. John's got similar, maybe a couple more. But it's definitely not a day that you can just go in and catch consistently on one line. It doesn't look that way anyway. In fact, thinking about it, what I could have done, I could have had a red bristle float in that dark water there, a black bristle float in that water just there, fed them both with 7,500 milligram bait, and then just swap between the two. Just loose fed and swap between the two. See, every time that I've gone in, oh, that bite, yeah, there we go. Lovely fish though. God, if you could just get the feed in, dead right, God, you could catch a weight. You can see why people have been catching £50 of them. It's incredible, the size of them. They're all a pound, pound and a half. But that's probably getting up to 3 o'clock now, so I haven't actually got that much time left, but I'm really glad I've come. Just those little things I've learned so far will be priceless on Saturday, I think. But what I am going to do before I go, I'm going to trim down that little tiny pot. It's not foul looked, it's just wrapped around the pin. I'm going to trim down that. Look at that, beautiful, aren't they? Absolutely beautiful fish. I'm going to trim down that tiny pot. And I'm just going to have a go that when I feel like I need to, I can just cup in a tiny bit of wet ground bait. and then that might just keep the fish in the peg. But the other way of doing it is to fish 2 lines and feed them exactly the same and then just alternate. That is the other option, which I think probably is the better option rather than feed them with a kinder pot. But really glad I come. It's lovely. It's been a mint day as well. It's so nice to just fish where I'm not absolutely freezing or I'm not soaking wet. Just seems like every time I go fishing at the moment, I'm freezing cold or soaking wet. Managed to dry all my kit out today as well, which is a right result. But if I would have fished just down there today, that's all white water. I could have fished with a little black bristle, would have been absolutely beautiful. Still going to keep loose feeding. I think loose feeding just creates an area in your peg, and when the fish are a bit scatty, it just allows them just to stay in the area. Oh, was that a little indication? See, this is the problem, because I've messed up where I've fished. Like, I can't see the little tiny indications that I normally would be able to see. I'm really annoyed myself that I fished here. It's definitely, it's got to be because I was rushing when I made that decision. But it just shows that I fished for like an hour, and I can't, sort of starting to think what I was doing wasn't right, but I think it probably is now. After putting that little ball in down there, going in and then not getting an indication, this loose feeding line's probably oh, John's just starting to hook a few carp now. Maybe that's why they loose feed pinkies and not maggots. Maybe you get less carp in your peg. Oh, is that a little indication again? So difficult to see with this light now. It wasn't too bad earlier when that sun was over the trees. Go on. Right, so next step, obviously I've caught 3 since I've been back on this line now. I'm going to trim down that. I'm going to trim down that pot just a touch. Or maybe I'll not bother trimming it down, just literally half fillet, just a tiny little bit of wet ground bait, pull it in and see how long it takes for it to get an indication from that bite, from that feed. Oh, there's a little indication. Oh, definitely a little indication there. Just wait 2 more minutes, because that was a proper indication, and it might get another one before having to come in. I think that was a liner, that. Float just started to move. I thought it might have been a skimmer just picked the bait up, but it's not. I've been a liner. There we go. A few fish there now. Must be time of day as well. But one thing I am happy with now, more happy with, is loose feeding. Definitely seems to have settled on my touch now. You've got to remember, I didn't pop my bait in till gone 12. In a match circumstance, it would have been, you would have potted the bait in at like 10, like 2 hours earlier. My peg there is really nice now, loose feeding, with that bit of ground bait. So yeah, I'm happy with that. That was an eyed. So I think on Saturday I'm going to keep it fairly simple. 2 lines, 75mm ground bait, 75mm ground bait, loose feed pinkies on both, and then just swap and try and manage your peg as best as possible. I can't see fishing up in that shallow water against the island or in the edges is going to be any good. It's just too clear. So hopefully fishing like that. Be nice to come in and just fish one line, but I think it's too clear. And you don't have to catch many fish to catch 40-50 pounds, so yeah. But we'll have a go with that little kinder pot in a minute. Right, so we're coming up to 3 o'clock now, so as you would expect, the fishing's got really good. I'm still loose feeding my pinkies, I'm topping up with a little bit of ground bait, and to be fair now I can just get one every chuck. It's really good. The fish are all big. They're all like £1 to like £3, so you can see why they catch £50. It wouldn't be hard to catch £50 of these size fish. The only thing I'm thinking, right, last time I drew Match Lake, and I was fishing and I've caught like 19, I don't know what that, 20 odd pound, and I was thinking to myself, these fish have got to eat pellets. They have to eat pellets. They're the perfect size to eat pellets. And the lad that won the match, I went up to him after and I spoke to him. They caught pellets, and no one mentioned pellets to me before coming over. So I'm thinking, I think this line is brilliant. This ground bait loose feeding pinkies is absolutely brilliant for later in the match. What I'm thinking is to pop my ground bait in off to my left or to my right, loose feed my pinkies there, and then start somewhere else with pellets with a tiny little ball of crushed expander and a few micros. And I think that's probably going to be a really nice way of starting your match. And then the whole time I'm fishing with my pellets, I can loose feed my pinkies on that line. And then if my pellet line's no good, if I go in and my pellet line's no good, there's no reason why I can't just pop some ground bait in on that line where I have fed my pellets and start loose feeding pinkies on both lines. But I just got a feeling pellets could be brilliant for these fish, especially early. Because late on now, they're really responding to this loose feeding. John's catching really well now as well. Like, every time I top up with ground bait now, within a couple of minutes, I'm back catching. Like, if it goes a little bit funny, top up with a little ball of crush and I'm back catching again. Whether pinkies have been better than would have been better than maggots today, I don't know. You would have thought with these size of fish that maggots would be best, but I mean the locals come and know it really well, and I don't know it well enough to disagree. The only downside I can think of fishing with pellets is that you're not going to catch any eyed. Like loose feeding maggots or pinkies is going to be the way for eyed, but I've only caught like 2 eyed today, and the rest have been has been skimmers. But every time it goes a little bit funny, if I just put a little tiny ball of crush with a little bit of loose in, and then back within a few minutes, I'm back catching again. I'm pretty happy with the distance and the depth I fished in. I think that deep water is probably a little bit too close to me for it to be good. That second shell for it will where it's all flat, and then just before it goes up to that island. That seems really nice to me, fishing like there. It's far enough away for, oh, that little indication, yeah. That is absolutely solid there now, really. God, it's lovely fishing. Solid now, John, isn't it? So just as that light's gone down, mind the match would be over by now, I think. But we fed our bait a lot later. I think that's a real decent one. Yep. So what I think I'm going to do on Saturday, I'm really glad I come. Lighter floats. Definitely going to feed one line exactly the same as what I fed now. I'm going to start one line off with pellets, little balls of little tiny pinches of crush and a few micros. And then if that pellet line doesn't work, then what I can do, I can change that to ground bait and pinkies and just have two lines for ground bait and pinkies. But I think if I fish like that, that's going to give me a really good chance of doing well. If I don't win, it's still going to give me a really good chance of having a nice day's fishing. Don't know about fishing in the edge, don't know about fishing short. I'm just a bit dubious of that. You are trying to win the match when you come here, so I don't want to mess about feeding 3 or 4 lines. I just want to come here, fish 2 lines. But yeah, that's the approach I'm going to take on Saturday. Hopefully, if I can draw the right little area. John said to me this morning, the area you want to be is like the middle of both banks. As you get towards the end, it seems to be a little bit more carpy. But hopefully, if I can draw in this little middle bit, feed it like that, work my way into the match, manage my peg a little bit, and hopefully we can put together a match winning weight. Fingers crossed anyway. Right, so I'm going to make that the last fish of the day. Learned an absolute load, to be honest, in the end. It's been good how I fished. Ground bait, loose feeding pinkies. But John's caught really well as well. Definitely, you cannot just feed one line. Like, every single time here, I catch a couple of fish, 2 or 3 fish, I have to top up with ground bait, leave it and come back to it, and literally every single time I do it, I go back to it, drop my rig in, boom, get one straight away. My floats are too heavy. 0.3 is just too heavy. I think a 0.2 Matrix F1 Slim with strung out number 10s would have been mint today. It would have been absolutely perfect. Elastic's been perfect. A 6 to 8 slick, that's been absolutely spot on. I think what I'm going to do, after thinking about it today and finishing the session, on Saturday I'm going to feed one line, just maggots. I'm not going to put any ground bait in because I feel like these eyed don't want to eat ground bait. I haven't hooked any eyed whatsoever. Well, no, I've hooked 2. Tell a lie, I've hooked 2. John's hooked a lot more than me, so I feel like I need one line with no ground bait in. And then my other line, I'm going to feed ground bait and probably loose feed pinkies there. And then I might have a pellet line, so like 3 lines. But if I go in and start on that pellet and within 15 minutes I'm not on a bite, I'll sack it off and just fish 2 lines. Ground bait and pinkies or maggots, and then maggots on 1 line, and just keep it really, really simple. But I'm really glad I've come. The fishing's great, there's a lovely looking venue. Yeah, float's a little bit too heavy. Ground bait for skimmers, neat maggots for eyed. Feeding 2 lines, 100%. The water's clear, so fishing in the right depth. Yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed, I can do all that on Saturday, and then give myself a really good chance. But yeah, really glad I come. Lovely venue, I love coming over here. Shame it's a little bit too far to come regular. But yeah, great day. I'm going to get my fish out in a minute. I've had mainly skimmers, so I'll do a little catch shot, and that will end the day there. Right, so last week went to White Springs on the Wednesday, went for a practice session which I filmed. I just broke down basically how I went about like a practice session, what I done, what I wanted to learn and what I did actually learn. So obviously I've fished the qualifiers since recording that video. I thought I'll do you a little breakdown of exactly what happened. So got there, all of the best Welsh anglers were there, in my opinion anyway, the best Welsh commercial anglers. So you got like John Harvey, Mikey, Lee Edwards, all the lads were there. So I knew really like I was going to have to get it right, I was going to have to draw well, and I was just going to have to get a little bit of luck along the way. So yeah, I drawn peg 4 on canal. Said to Mikey about it, and he said yes, good area. He said chill right is a little bit better, like 6 and 8, where the silver birches are behind you. And yeah, so John Harvey said exactly the same thing on Wednesday. He said about where you want to be at the silver birches, but I'm one peg away from that, so I was fairly happy. He also said there was no hide in that area, so I thought right, all out, try and catch some bream. Got to win the match to qualify. So yeah, that's what I was going to do. So plumbed up. I plumbed up right against the island where it was about 3 foot deep, and then I plumbed up 2 lines like a metre away from the island. And what my plan was to start on pellets in that middle line, and then have 2 ground bait lines, which I could bounce off each other. In my practice session, it was very obvious that you needed 2 lines. I go over that a little bit. And I could just bounce off them. So I thought I'll start on pallets, try and get a good little run, try and get an initial start, and then bounce off the 2. So started the match, gone across on pallets, sat there 2 minutes, got one, 12 ounces. I'm like, cool, that'll do. Gone across, gone like another 5 minutes, and I could tell it wasn't quite right. Boom, got one like 5 ounces. And then I looked round and there was other people catching like an odd bigger skimmer. Rob Jones to my right, also a very good angler. He was catching a lot of smaller skimmers. He was catching one a chuck, and I was like, I don't think that size of fish is going to be good enough to win. But after like an hour to 2 hours, he was the only one catching. I'm thinking, I was kind of getting frustrated because I thought that wouldn't be the way to win, and he was doing it, and then it was looking like he was going to win. So I thought, you know what, like hour and a half gone, I've gone on my ground bait lines and I just couldn't catch anything. I was literally going nowhere. And then, so I thought to myself, well, obviously ground bait and fishing for skimmers isn't right, because that's what I've done and I can't catch. And the only way I'm going to beat Rob now, or some of the other anglers, is to catch some decent fish. So I thought, you know what, stuff it. I replumbed up to my left, and I replumbed up like in between my 2 ground bait lines, so I was away from it. And I thought I'm just going to pot some live maggots both on those 2 lines and just try and catch some hide. And you never know, something might happen. I was thinking, like at that point, I was thinking, well, I'm not going to win now. I'm not going to win now. I'm so far behind. And then left it 10 minutes, those 2 maggot lines, went on my ground bait lines, and nothing again. Popped on the maggot lines where I just fed neat maggots and I've loose fed maggots, caught one a chuck. Caught skimmers one a chuck. I'm like, couldn't believe it, honestly. I was just like gobsmacked, honestly. So yeah, I've fed my maggots, and then basically what I've done, I've had my 2 maggot lines, and I've just bounced off my 2 maggot lines, loose feeding and potting maggots, and I've just scrapped my 2 ground bait lines. And I'm just like, I can't believe that's happened. So yeah, I've caught well. I've had an hour mid-match where I've had an absolute nightmare. So basically, like the last 3 or 4 years, I've used the same hook for all my silverfish fishing. Just used the same hook for everything. And I've never ever lost any fish. And I just went through a spell where I've lost, like every one I hook, you just like go boom like that. You come to ship in, it's come off. And I'm like, that's the same hook I used on Wednesday where I never used one. It's the same hook I've used for the last 3 years with that elastic and that hook, and I've never lost one. And I'm like, why is this happening? It's just like, I can't believe this is happening. So I'll get on to why that happened in a bit. But yeah, I carried on. I changed the hook I was using, went to an even bigger hook. I thought I'd rather not hook one and hook one and lose it. So I thought I just went to a real big hook, another pattern of hook that I've been using, a Matrix X2 sample hook, which will be out very shortly. Size 16 with a single maggot, which looked horrible to me because it was massive. But I thought, I'm not sitting here losing them. I'd just rather not get a bite than hook one and lose it. So I changed to a 16, single maggot, dropped in, I caught one straight away, and literally I could have skull dragged it in. I've just lifted that, and then the last like hour and a half after my good spell and after having that little bit of a meltdown, I've caught one a chuck. It was absolutely brilliant. Loose feeding maggots whilst you're on it. Pot some, when it goes dead, pot some, go on to the other line. Loose feed, when that goes dead, pot some, go back on the other line. And I felt like I had my lines and my peg perfect. It's very rare that you get in a situation where like you can tell you're just doing it perfect. And it was total fluke how it happened with me not catching on the ground bait and deciding to put the maggots in, but that's just fishing for you. So yeah, I've caught well. I've caught a real decent stamp fish. I've ended up with £23, which was enough to win the match and qualify for the final, which I was absolutely made up with. After the match, I didn't think I won because the guy in the corner caught well, and he's caught some bigger skimmers, and I was absolutely seething because I had that hour where I've lost. I'm going to be honest, I probably lost 7 big uns in that time, and I just couldn't work out why it happened, because I've just used those hooks and that elastics like forever, and I couldn't work out. So lucky enough, I've done enough, like that last hour and a half and that change, I made that change early enough, which allowed me to catch £23, which was enough to win. But I was buzzing because I won, but I couldn't get to sleep that night because I was just trying to think why it happened. And the only thing I can come up with is that when I've used those hooks in the past, I've always used them with worms, casters, pinkies, and double maggot. I used them at Aston Parks with double maggot. I've used them at Ivy Ice with worms. I've used them at Viaduct with casters, and I've used them at White Springs with pinkies, and I've never had a problem. I put a single maggot on, and I've lost a load of fish. Now, I was chatting to Des earlier on the phone, and I'm like, Des, I still can't work this out. And he's like, yeah, but don't be bothered, you still won. But no, but I still want to know why what's happened. I need to know in my brain why something's happened when you've had a little bit of a meltdown. So he was saying, from his experience in the past when he's fished a lot with like single maggot feeder fishing on natural venues, he seems to think when the fish take the bait in, they roll the maggot. Now, they don't do it with maggot, they don't do it with worms, they don't do it with casters, and they don't do it with pinkies or double maggot because they can't do it. Single maggot, they can roll the maggot over the hook. So that's one explanation of it, that when you fish with single maggot on the hook, you really have to use a big hook, like a size 16 of these new hooks I've been using. But yeah, that's what I'm glad I sort of know roughly why it happened. It's just single maggot. When you use single maggot, you've got to use big hooks because of that reason. So I understand why it's happened now. But yeah, we had a brilliant day. Absolutely mint. I was so happy to qualify because I've had a couple of close calls last year. I've had a little bit of bad luck, especially at IVA and places like that. A little bit of bad luck in the past. So I've had it sorted there, and I've gone. It's not really gone my way. So it was nice to qualify and get in the final. So yeah, I'm absolutely buzzing for the final now. The final was at Southend Farm, fishing for like I think they're paying out like 20 grand on the day. So yeah, I'm going to put some effort into that. My good mate Ben Ag as well is also qualified. So me and him are going to go up, try and get it sorted, work with Will as well because he knows the venue really well, and yeah, try and win the final for you. I'll probably try and film the final. I won't film it myself. I'll probably get someone to do it because it's quite an important match. So yeah, that's the rundown of what's happened on the day. Really happy with the result. Not so happy with the performance because of those hooks, but that's fishing for you. Sometimes when you draw a strong peg, you feed it right, you can do other things wrong and you can still win. So yeah, hope you, yeah, I'm going to try and film the final for you and hope you enjoy it.